We now return to the cold truth. The truth that abortion is a conspiracy to commit genocide. The third point against the conspiracy is that abortion is becoming more popular because it is becoming more popular. That sounds redundant, but it is poignant, so let us reiterate. The reason people are performing more abortions is because more people, especially those in the modern media, are promoting it as cool or modern. They push down the knowledge that abortion is murder because it is uncool or outdated. One famous woman once said at a colloquium at which we happened to be in attendance, as we move towards a more inclusive society, supporting access to abortion is not just a personal choice, it's a statement of freedom and self-determination that many women are now prioritizing. What does that mean? What does it mean? A more inclusive society? Never has society been less inclusive. It's not just a personal choice? Then what is the argument that that's all it ever was, a personal choice? It's a statement of freedom from what? As we said before, freedom to choose is already hers. That is inherent and cannot be taken away. What then, pray tell, is this freedom? The only answers are freedom from morality and freedom from consequences. That's not true freedom. That's a hypothetical freedom that comes at the cost of true freedom. It's a statement of self-determination? What is that supposed to mean? That you are determined not to keep your private areas to yourself? Or that you are determined to end a life? Buzzwords without meaning. Many women are now prioritizing. Herein lies our point. Many women have prioritized it for thousands of years. What many women are now prioritizing is their ability to have sex whenever they want, and the ability to demean themselves by doing work that is substantially inferior to their intellectually challenging, permanently meaningful, exalted, and time-honored potential as mothers. The first abortions ever recorded were in 1500 BC. That's over 3,500 years ago. That's not new. It's older than the modern understanding of math or science or reasoning. 3,500 years ago, a woman would stick a piece of papyrus covered in honey and smashed dates up her vagina in hopes that it would smoke out the baby. Other women would perform strenuous exercise like rowing and climbing to crush or destroy the unwanted life. Even 3,000 years later, from the 1600s to the 1800s, many women had abortions brought on by combinations of herbs and tribal medicines from the most socially backward places on the globe. Abortion is not new. It is very old. Women are not now prioritizing anything. They are falling into the habits and patterns of a society long forgotten. They are acting like women from a time long rejected. Their priorities are from a time when maternal mortality and infant mortality were high. Orphanages were more myth than reality. Life was short and undesirable. The only two things that have not changed are that women like sex and that women can get pregnant from sex whether they want to or not. The popularity of celebrities who swear by abortion as a way to keep their fame and fortune is not the needle by which the compass of society is directed. Recent events make it very clear that the conservative belief is the grand majority of society, and that those who have been influenced by media are typically just the loudest. Only in big cities where abortion is common is it common, or, in other words, the more people get an abortion, the more other people begin to think it is an option, and this mostly happens in crowded and loud cities that ultimately make up a small fraction of the overall population. Walter Benjamin, one of the best remembered critical thinkers of the 20th century, said this: "It is precisely the purpose of the public opinion generated by the press to make the public incapable of judging, to insinuate into it the attitude of someone irresponsible, uninformed." So it is with abortion. A woman deciding to kill a child because an actress more famous for her breasts than for her skill said it was cool is no different than a child in the 70s deciding to smoke cigarettes because a cartoon camel made it look cool. Women known for their rampant sex drive and open relationships who show off their sacred parts by wearing overpriced tablecloths cut like children's snowflake crafts and tout abortion as their favorite way to have their cake and eat it too, are not experts on humanity any more than they are people worthy of emulation. It would be better for girls to grow up pretending to be pirates than the women of Hollywood for all the so-called honor the majority of celebrities show. There are celebrities who are truly worthy of admiration, but they find it harder each passing year to get their name up in lights anymore as they stand up for their unpopular beliefs. The grand majority, a number that is very high but difficult to pin down, of pro-abortion cases that are presented in all kinds of media, including in courtrooms and Senate buildings, are incidental and circumstantial. We do not have to give examples. They are everywhere. Next time you see a pro-abortion advertisement, look anywhere for statistics, numbers, hard cold facts. There will be few, if any. Why? Because there aren't many. Pro-abortion is built on single-case stories rather than the big picture view. This is true of most liberal policies these days. They are focused on the here and now rather than the past and future. There are few statistics, and those that they have are typically from small and unrepresentative samples. What there are is testimonials. Testimonials of individuals who, for one reason or another, are so proud to have gotten an abortion, or are so mad that they could not. These testimonials, of which we have read hundreds, all have at least 4 things in common. 1. They are all from single individuals, not single as in not married, though that is also very common. Single as in one person's voice that describes events from their own life specifically, that are then presented to the world as being universal. Things like abortion should be legal because I was bleeding and the doctor said I couldn't have an abortion. That leads to the second point. 2, they are all vague and lopsided. These reports only give one side of the story, usually the most emotional and least academically or medically qualified side. They appeal to your emotions, tug on your heartstrings, all without ever mentioning the fact that they could have gone elsewhere, explaining why the doctor said no, or even mentioning why they thought abortion was the only option. Which leads directly to point 3. In almost all cases, abortion is not the only option, but is presented to the masses as the only option. The readers see these blogs and say, wow, I wish she could get that abortion. She needs it so desperately. What's wrong with that doctor? All the while, the writers use verbal sleight of hand to make the reader forget that abortion is only one of a million options. And fourth, and most importantly, these events are all synchronic, meaning from one point in time. At the time, they were so proud of themselves and thought they would never feel otherwise. They never explain how they feel about it weeks, months, and years, or even decades later. Many bloggers have retracted their pro-choice blogs because they have since experienced destructive side effects. On the other hand, there are dozens of women on social media who receive thumbs downs and hateful comments about their posts, saying that they wish they could take back their abortions. Why do people boo them? Why do they even care? The answer is because people like to think of every event in our lives as a snapshot in a photo album rather than a scene in a movie reel. They came to a blog or a YouTube channel to read a simple post of, I didn't want this baby. I got an abortion. I'm happy. Unfortunately, real life seldom works out like a Hallmark film, and abortions do not lead to happily ever after. Meanwhile, unlike pro-choicers who base their entire worldview on a handful of blog posts, pro-lifers base theirs on a combination of common sense, scripture and religious belief, science, statistics, and cold truth. They mine for the tiny but brilliant nuggets of cold truth hidden within miles of tunnels of valueless information generated by the liberal media to bury the gold they fear. Pro-lifers like us have to search for answers because the media most often does not want them to find them. Said another way, pro-choicers take the rotten appetizers that are set on the table on a golden tray while pro-lifers look for the delicious fresh food shoved into the far back corners of media's refrigerator. All the while, pro-choicers laugh at pro-lifers for their wasted efforts and ignore the sometimes overbearing but always well-meaning warnings of the pro-lifer not to eat the rotten food. To prove that the average American pro-choice belief is founded on ignorance bolstered by media with an agenda, let us turn to actual numbers. These stats are bulletproof evidence that the average pro-choicer has no idea what they claim to believe. A poll was taken of 10,000 American women who joined an open protest for pro-choice after the overturning of the Roe v. Wade case. These are women who were part of the riot but not arrested, and were mostly approached one by one through email, who chose to share their answers. You can find this data online if the liberal media that has tried to sweep away any evidence of that riot has not expunged it first. We will not give references because we have seen many who are found to stand against abortion sued and forced to take the truth off the internet because it offends those who can't handle the truth. But we will not be dissuaded from sharing the cold truth. That these 10,000 women were part of that riot means they thought they knew what pro-choice stands for and thought they cared enough to stand outside for hours to protest the perceived loss of rights they never had. This survey, taken by a media conglomerate that shall remain nameless, but that you can look up if you think you can find it through the mire of the liberal-controlled media, reveals many deeply saddening yet ridiculously hilarious statistics. While that makes up only about 1/15 of those protesters, we can assume by the care the analysts put into selecting interviewees that it is representative of most pro-choicers. Before we list the statistics, let us remind the viewers with somberness about that utterly violent protest. One reporter who was part of the surveying team is quoted as saying, "On the evening of the post-Roe v. Wade attack on Washington, the shocking images that unfolded were nothing short of a nightmare for our nation's capital. As a proud supporter of the values that our news station has championed, it is disheartening to report that the violence erupted in an organized protest led by factions of pro-choice women and men who abandoned peaceful dialogue in favor of chaos. Numbers are estimated at 150,000, of whom most are women, 10 times the size of the protest that took place here just last year." Eyewitness accounts describe a scene filled with hostility as several individuals clashed violently with law enforcement. Tragically, at least 15 lives were lost that night, including those of 5 officers. Numerous others were hospitalized due to injuries sustained in the mayhem, with estimates placing over 100 people in need of critical attention. What was particularly alarming was the sight of armed individuals amidst the chaos. An estimated 40% of the reported participants were carrying firearms, many of them openly defying law enforcement directives. This alarming statistic raises profound concerns about the specter of lawlessness that surrounded the protest. Reports indicate that property damage reached a staggering cost of hundreds of millions, with downtown businesses and government offices suffering shattered windows, burned shops, destroyed vehicles, and graffiti with such messages as "My body, my rights," that defaced several historic buildings that symbolize our democracy. This unprecedented violence not only underscores the deepening political divisions in our nation, but also raises critical questions about the safety of our communities and the importance of upholding the rule of law. Remember that the news basically covered up this event. On the other hand, the certainly awful but noticeably smaller rally in 2021, in which 10 were killed opposing Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 election, was put front and center. Again, we see that liberals would do anything to cover their own blunders while exaggerating those of the conservatives. No matter your feelings about politics, remember the palpable hypocrisy of that insipid attack that even a 4th grade knowledge of US politics should have prevented, as we will discuss more thoroughly later. Those who typically tout the disarming of America brought guns and shot at officers of the law. The self-proclaimed party of love destroyed lives, businesses, and national monuments, in favor of a policy that did not directly make any changes to any law, in large part because it could not. And yet, 5 officers would never go home to their families because of this knife that has received coverage only on a handful of news channels. This behavior is not new and is certainly increasing. The downplaying of this attack aside, remember that those who wanted the right to kill babies were willing to kill adults and damage property for it. Remembering the report of the charged atmosphere on that black day in Washington, hear this poll that proves that most of the women marching on Washington that day did not even know why they were doing it. 1. When asked what percentage of these women's beliefs in abortion were influenced by celebrities or famous people, 72% answered that their opinion was somewhere between somewhat and entirely influenced by pro-choice celebrities. 55 of the total, including 75% of those who answered no to the first question, or 21% in all, stated that they were between somewhat and entirely influenced by their peers' opinions. This suggests clearly that 93% of 10,000 women polled, or about 9,300 of them, were willing to march on Washington to express opinions that were never really theirs, just because someone else told them to care. Many felt these strong opinions due to the words of people they had never met. That meant that only about 7% of the women taken aside for this presumably representative sample actually believed in what they were willing to commit crimes for. 2. 61% of the women polled stated that they would, themselves, never have an abortion, while 15% said they probably would not have an abortion. This raises serious doubts about the policy they claim to publicly support. Let's look at that again. Over 3/4 of women interviewed who had marched for women's rights to have an abortion were at least unlikely to avail themselves of that right. Why then do they care? That would be akin to a vegan advocate violently protesting the right to eat meat. It can be noted that most pro-abortion advocates will never get an abortion themselves. What is important to understand, if that number is universal, is that the grand majority of websites, blogs, posts, and news reports touting the benefits of abortion, extolling abortion, and demanding abortion rights are from people who would never get an abortion. Let that sink in, that most loud voices for pro-choice in public are pro-life in their own homes, at least by their actions. Note the distinct similarity to drug pushers, who preach the values of their product but would never use it themselves. Contrast it to the pro-lifers, who unilaterally would never get an abortion unless it fell into one of the 3 control categories, or else wish that they knew when they had one what they know now and would take it back in a heartbeat. As the master teacher said, ye shall know them by their fruits. 3. 75% of women, including many from the 75% who would never get an abortion as mentioned in the second question, suggested they were going to keep fighting for abortion rights no matter what, even if the government declared abortion to be murder. Remember, most of them do not know what they believe, and many will never have an abortion themselves. Let's take that into perspective. They believe the media's propaganda, which has, for its own gain, convinced them abortion is not murder. So when the surveyors asked them if they would keep fighting for it, even if it was proven to be murder, they said yes. Many of the same party believe meat is murder and strongly eschew guns, but will continue to fight for the right to an abortion under the pretense that it is not murder, even if their belief is proven false. Abortion is murder in all but name, of that we can be absolutely certain. But these women promise to never accept the cold truth, all the while caring deeply about others' rights to abortion, while planning to never have one themselves. They are fighting to destroy other women's lives, bodies, families, relationships, and futures, but not their own. 4. Only 25% said if the price for abortion was a 1 to 2 year prison sentence, they would be willing to risk the punishment. That is nearly cut in half to 12.8% who said they would continue if they would be given a 5 to 7 year sentence. If the punishment was life in prison, that number decreases to 3.8%. If the punishment was death, that number dwindles to 1.3%. Mahatma Mohandas Gandhi was attributed as having said, "If you are not prepared to die for your beliefs, then they are not really beliefs at all." According to that, only about 1,950 of the 150,000 violent protesters who marched on Washington really believed in abortion. Our founding fathers were willing to suffer death in the most violent of ways for their beliefs. If the majority of pro-choicers claim, as they do, that they are pioneers of women's rights, they ought to act like it and not like fair-weather voters. Let it be known, we and many pro-lifers would happily die 1,000 deaths if it meant saving one infant from being torn apart by the limbs. 5. Speaking of torn apart by limbs, when asked to describe the abortion process, 66% were not able to produce an accurate narrative. The most common answers given were A. The woman is given a shot and then the fetus is absorbed into the body. B. The woman is given a pill and the fetus is expelled from the body like excrement. And C. The woman is given a pill and the fetus is expelled from the body like vomit. The first narrative in particular makes the process seem entirely benign. Since many of these surveys were performed by email significantly after the riots, women taking the survey could have easily looked up the answer to this question. Their unwillingness to do so is damning. Few respondents used the word baby or person, and in almost all of those 2/3 cases where the presented narrative was inaccurate, women prioritized their own reaction rather than the actual process of dismantling the fetus. 6. When asked whose responsibility an unplanned pregnancy is, 64% said the fault is on the man. Not much to say here other than it takes two to tango. Remember, men, the next time you have extramarital sex, that 2/3 of pro-choice women surveyed blamed men entirely for their actions. Are you sure you want to get into bed literally or figuratively with these women? 1.8% said women were entirely to blame, and, frankly, they are wrong too. The remaining 1/3 accept that both sexes are responsible. Despite that last one being true, and a decently high number, it is shockingly low for something that might have been expected to be closer to 98%. Failure to take accountability for choices and willingness to put them entirely on another's shoulders is a sign that pro-choice is a moral Hindenburg. 7. When they were told or read the statistics we have given so far, and the statistics we will give about abortion leading to high rates of suicide, divorce, and drug abuse, 68% responded that they had never heard those statistics before, and 17% claimed that they had never considered them. 48% of the total stated that they did not believe them, even though they were given by reputable sources. This shows at least three major issues. First, a lack of education of the American woman about abortion, which includes a lack of knowledge in even those who have pursued abortions in the past. Second, the refusal to admit that the stats are against them. This is recognizant of many issues proliferated by the Liberal Party of the United States. Third, and most disgusting, a large sampling, possibly 1/3 of all women polled, would believe the words of celebrities when contrasted with the first stat over the words of scientists, doctors, and data professionals. As a popular social media poster said, the reason facts don't change most people's opinions is because most people don't use facts to form their opinions, they use their opinions to form their facts. 8. When asked what Roe v. Wade meant for America, 71% believed it gave women the right to have an abortion. To be honest, we are a little surprised how low this number is, considering that so many are willing to commit crimes to force the judges to change their decision. As we will mention in points 4 and 5, Roe v. Wade is a judicial precedent, not a law. It never had any legal power to make laws. 71% misunderstand completely, and some of the remainder may still not have understood. Again, this is a non-timed survey with access to the internet being fundamentally a given. 9. In conjunction with number 8, 89% believed that the overturning of Roe v. Wade meant that abortion rights were unilaterally removed. Well, yeah, that makes sense that they would think that, considering they attacked Washington rather than air grievances with their local judiciary and legislature. As we will remind the listener in points 4 and 5, overturning Roe v. Wade did nothing more or less than push abortion rights to the state level. Yes, 17 states banned abortion in most or all ways, as was their right, but that still means that 33 states, regrettably, have not yet made that crucial decision. The fact that 11% of protesters either knew or claimed to know that Roe v. Wade has no legal power allowing or preventing abortion is the surprise here, since anyone who knew that should never have carried signs touting rights that were neither given nor taken away with this court decision. 10. When asked what the best form of birth control is, 48% of these protesters answered abortion. We don't believe that most of them were serious, but almost half were willing to claim that abortion was in place to prevent unwanted children. How utterly psychedelic is that? 12 out of 25 pro-choice women agreed that abortion is the best way to prevent unwanted pregnancies. Abortion is not pregnancy control, which we suppose is a more accurate term than birth control. The pregnancy already happened. What abortion prevents is the need to take responsibility for a human life. Abstinence is the #1 form of birth control. That should be obvious. 100% of people who are 100% abstinent have 0 unwanted pregnancies 100% of the time. That statistic cannot be beaten or matched. Of course, 100% abstinence before marriage and 100% faithfulness in marriage is the absolute ideal, and we would say that to anyone. Some people claim it is impossible, some even claim it is irresponsible. Baloney, hogwash, fiddle-faddle, and poppycock a lot of it. We were 100% abstinent before marriage and are 100% faithful in it. So were our parents, their parents, and their parents too. Our siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends have done the same, and they are rightly proud of it. Most humans throughout history, even in the darkness of the Middle Ages, did it. Do not tell us you cannot control yourself. You can, you just do not want to. We did it, you can too. Abstinence is possible, it is practical, it is good. For those who cannot live up to this goal, which should be described as a very low bar, condoms, pills, and many other mechanisms exist that prevent a sperm from ever implanting into an egg 99.9% of the time. If necessary, surgeries can be performed. Abortion is never a form of birth control. It is murder. Even assuming that most of these 48% of women in this survey were answering abortion as the best birth control because they are trying to justify being swept up in the mob mentality in which they found themselves, how can anyone who claims to have an IQ high enough to breathe believe abortion is any kind of birth control? We are sickened by this result and wish it would disappear from the so-called minds of our brainwashed young women. The truth will set you free. The next truth we will present is that the law never has protected abortion, but stands strongly against it. The cold truth is undeniable.